All right, this video actually demonstrates what my take was on the project that I'm assigning. So I actually completed the upcoming statistics project, giving you an example of what I came up with to accomplish all of the requirements. Without giving you too much information ahead of time about what my project is about, I'll just dive in and have you take a look at it. This is an experiment that begins with half of the participants taking a look at pictures of these U.S. coins. Then they are given a second sheet of information about the coins. What they may realize is that some of the information here on this document contradicts pictures that they were given. The other half of the participants are given the actual pictures of the backs of these U.S. quarters. So some of the participants, half the participants, received fake news, and the other half received actual, truthful news, which are the illustrations. Both were quizzed on the pictures of the quarters, but they were quizzed on what they read. So my intent was to find out how much a lasting impression of fake news would be on a group of people. So fake news is all about getting information, and then even afterwards, if you were given the truth, some people are resistant to hold on to what they heard originally or saw originally. So they were given this quiz based on what they read, not what they saw. And then there's a disclaimer right at the very top there that you are basing your answers on what you read. All right, so that's an example of the experiment that I set up. On Schoology and in class, you'll also find all these documents handed to you as well, and it goes over the intent of the project and exactly how you'll be graded on the project. So the project is intended to dive into the idea of bias, that people will have a tendency to behave a certain way based on stimulus around them that influences their decisions and their opinions. And this is something for you to look over, hopefully before class, so that when class begins, you can snap right into beginning your project and selecting your theme of what your project will be on. So this document that you're given gives you step-by-step scoreboard on what you are actually going to be graded on and how many points each part will be worth. It begins with you selecting one of the biases from the list of biases that are in the documentation. That would be my intention, to have you select one of those, different from somebody else, but there are some stipulations in terms of, or conditions that might make it so you could use your own idea, or even possibly select the same bias that somebody else selected, as long as your approach is quite different. But that's for you to run by me. And for example, here are some of the other biases. Well, I think it's coming up in the document. There's more to it in terms of how you're going to be graded. Setting up an experiment, examining the experiment with a hypothesis test and a confidence interval. And I've given you examples of all of those things on Schoology, and I will in class as well. There has to be a paragraph at the end that illustrates what's happening, and you can read through the checklist of all the necessary ingredients to get full credit. But something to consider now is to look these over either on the video or from the documents on Schoology of the types of things you could be exploring. So from my list, I chose this continued influence effect. I'd rather you chose one of the other many biases that I've listed here, courtesy of Wikipedia. And from these biases, you have to come up with some sort of experiment that you're going to do in order to try to find out if there is this type of bias that is claimed to exist. Let's see, I mean, the very first one on the list is the bandwagon effect. So your experiment could be, do people believe things or do things just because other people do or believe the same thing? And you could set up some sort of creative idea to try to explore those sort of things. And you can read through the many biases that are here, and some of them have very strange names and very unexpected consequences that you may or may not have heard of ever before. So let's see, there's some more on. And you could pause the video or rewind it if you need to actually read some of these. You could go online and actually look up information that has priorly been explored using these sort of ideas. There's the TV show Brain Games that I know is on Netflix that has explored several of these ideas. And like I said, you could pause the video, just look at the documents to make a better decision on what you might want to learn about. But you can see that there's a wide range of different things you could actually explore. I mean, the list goes on. I don't even know how many there are here, but good for you potential psychology majors, and most of you will probably take a psychology class in the future, so this will benefit you in that regard as well. And you can see the list goes on for quite some time here. And there we go. So also in the documents I'm giving you is my example of the project worked out from start to finish. I've already showed you the sheets that I provided my subjects with. It starts off with an introductory paragraph, and you should read these over from start to finish, just to get a running start on things. And if you did this tonight ahead of time, that would actually provide you with a little bit of a running start, so that you can get going right away with assembling your ideas. Now, one question is, could you work with another student? Of course, that's encouraged, but as the documentation says, you're going to have to show equal participation in the project. And you can read that up in the checklist. It describes, if you're going to be working on this with another student, how I'd like you to present the information, so that I can see that both participants, put into it some work. So you're going to be showing the game plan of your experiment, describing your experiment in details about how it's run, and then the stuff that we worked on in the spring, completing a hypothesis test that is set up from your results, graphing the results that came about from your experiment, and then finally completing the hypothesis test, and then also completing a confidence interval on the results. So a very thorough examination of the work that you, and then finally finishing up with a paragraph that describes the wide variety of things that you noticed and that you experienced and that you had difficulty with, and the conclusions of your experiment. So I think that pretty much rounds everything off for what I've got there for you. This last part was just some directions that I actually gave, specific directions that I gave the participants for the experiment. So look over all that information, and it's many pages, but it gets you into the mindset of what you're about to accomplish. And good luck.